I feel that my parents gave us a real grounding in being respecting yourself. You know, I can remember an incident when I was quite young, preschool, and my mother and I were shopping downtown, and I don't know what precipitated it, but she said to me, you know, there are people who aren't going to like you because of the color of your skin. And she said, that's their problem. And that was a very liberating message to a young Black person, because so many Black people in this country are still feeling under the yoke of inferiority. And then plus they took us to museums, and we had got library cards very early, and then they started taking us camping. And so we stepped somewhat outside of what typical African-American experience is. It wasn't so much as a concrete choice as much as it was an evolution. But ultimately, I moved to New York to be with a girlfriend of mine who was going to Pratt. And my intention was to do photography. And I did that for a while, but it wasn't really working for me financially. And I had a landlord who was a plumber, and he was working on a brownstone, and they needed a carpenter. And so I had grown up around people who worked on their homes. So I basically, without any kind of intent, learned how to do plumbing and electrical work and carpentry. And so I did that for a while. And as I got more successful, it actually became less interesting to me because it was more about the headaches, the management, and not actually doing the work. And so I had two friends who were opening up a shop. It was a model shop for doing special effects for advertising and film. And they wanted somebody to share the space. I moved in with them. And I was doing more kitchen cabinets than anything when I first moved into there, as well as doing some renovation. The transitions weren't that crisp. And at a certain point, I had a couple commissions for some furniture, and realized that was really what I liked. You know, it was using all of my creative energy as well as the physical, how I responded to it physically. And so I started to call myself a furniture maker in order to limit all the repair work that people wanted me to do. And so that's how it started. I studied anthropology actually in college, and had a minor in zoology. So culture was very important. In terms of design, I guess I kind of picked up interest on that, partly in the library. Working for the library, I came across a lot of books about design. I had worked for the DC Library for, I think about 12 years. And in fact, my in-depth training of furniture making was all done through reading and experimentation. I have no formal training in it. It's called the Dan chair. And it is basically referencing a chair in Africa. Mostly furniture in Africa is done through negative work. You basically have to start with a big piece of wood and you take away material. This is one that's kind of unusual in that it is actually constructed of pieces. And I'd always seen it, and it always had a reference for me, but I had no drive to do it, but I met a gentleman from Virginia who had started collecting wood from historical sites, and it was called Historical Woods. And he engaged, I don't know, maybe about 12 or more furniture makers and asked them, what woods they were interested in. And I wanted some woods from Mount Vernon and Monticello because they both were slave plantations. And I made the chair, and I put an unusual finish on it. I had wanted to produce a graphite finish for quite a while. And it references really my pride in being African American. I mean, that's really the driver of the whole thing, because I feel that African Americans have contributed so much to this country that's not acknowledged. And it really kind of gets me annoyed when I hear people, say disparaging things about, African Americans, and the average African American is really working under a very powerful negative pressure in this country. And so this was really a piece to show my pride in being African American and what we've contributed to this country. Well, one, I use curves a lot because I think, and in relationship to rectilinear forms, and I think that those two things have a strong resonance for us as human beings. Rectilinear forms are very intellectual. We know how long they are, how wide they are, how thick they are, the angles of them. You can see them. But when you introduce a curve, you're more or less just feeling that. It's not very easy to define that well, you can define it in mathematical terms, but because it's so continuous, you kind of see it. And I think that reflects the dichotomy of being human, which is we're not just intellectual beings, but we're emotional beings. And I think that that play of rectilinear and curved forms is really a reference to that. Forms in nature and in built forms are really the inspiration for most of my work. Some are forms that I basically worked out, especially with legs of things, can be more sculptural than anything. But one example is in New York State, they have these high tension lines, and they're made of two tall telephone poles with a glue lamp across the top, and the wires are hung from the glue lamp. And that form it just spoke to me without me having to, really think about it a lot. It just came up and I saw it, and I was doing a table, and I used that idea to basically design this table. Culturally, I would say my furniture is heavily influenced by Japanese culture and, to a lesser degree, African culture. Shibui, it means simple elegance. It's a Japanese term. And my work has always been about form. And I'm very sensitive to form. I think that's another advantage of being a dyslexic. And I just at a certain point saw that, just as seeing my work as a whole and seeing how, in some places, in some pieces, I actually directly referenced Asian culture. The piece I did for the Peabody-Essex Museum is basically very much referencing Chinese culture. And it also is a piece that what was motivating it was actually I'd studied Tai Chi for about 30 years. And our master was a gentleman from China, Chen Men Ching, who was a master of 5 arts. And so that piece was a dedication to him in the afterlife. He had died. And the piece is light wood, which is not typical in China. But in China, white is the color of death. And so my whole point was to reference that. And also it's a two-part piece. It's a chair and a desk. And they are appear disarticulated. And that is a reference to in the afterlife, in the Taoist traditions of China. There's people who die don't go away, and so this was something to be used in the afterlife. And I have to go back to my parents and how they exposed us to various cultural and artistic things. And how they let us experiment with making of various things. I mean, I've done a little jewelry, I've done leather work, I mean, these were nothing that I've, include in my professional life, but you're getting a taste of and feeling the satisfaction of making something. I mean, for a long time, I made all my wallets and eyeglass cases and belts out of leather, the self-satisfaction of that is very informative, but it also reinforced, I guess, this idea that you can define yourself, I think that's what I would say is the biggest takeaway about who I am, is that I get to define who I am.